What if your social life isn't an abundance, but a sign of excess inventory? What if the very thing you've been taught to build, more connections, more conversation, more availability, is actually the reason you're feeling mentally exhausted? Because no one tells you this. Every relationship you maintain is not neutral. It's not passive, it's not free, it's a line item. It requires energy, attention, memory, emotional processing, time, and most people are running a system with no accounting. They don't audit who's taking from them. They don't question what they're carrying. They just keep adding more people, more conversations, and more obligations. And then they wonder why their internal world feels crowded. This is where the shift begins. Because having no friends isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's the first moment your system becomes visible. There's a quiet weight that comes with maintaining relationships that no one prepares you for. It's not just the time you spend talking to someone, it's everything that comes with it. Remembering details, responding to messages, managing tone, thinking about how something you might have said has been received, replaying conversations, anticipating the next interaction. That's overhead, and the modern world has amplified it. You're no longer just maintaining relationships in real life, you're maintaining them digitally, constantly. Every notification becomes a micro decision, every message becomes an obligation, and every silence becomes something to interpret. You're not just connected, you're accountable. And most people never stop to ask, how much of my energy is being spent maintaining this? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not all connections are equal, but they all cost something. And when your system is filled with low return relationships, your energy gets diluted across too many places to be meaningful anywhere. This is how people become fragmented. A little bit of themselves everywhere, but nowhere fully. The most dangerous part is that it feels normal. It feels like life. You answer texts, you check in, you maintain surface level conversations, you keep people in your orbit just in case. And because everyone else is doing it, you don't question it. But normal doesn't mean optimal, and it doesn't mean aligned. It just means common. There's a difference between being socially active and being socially overextended. And most people don't realize they've crossed that line until they feel it. That low-level fatigue, that subtle irritation, that sense that your attention is constantly being pulled outward, even when you're alone. That's not life, that's leakage. If you were running a business, you wouldn't keep inventory that doesn't move. You wouldn't store items that take up space, require maintenance, and generate no return. You would audit. You would look at what's actually valuable and what's just sitting there. But in your social life, you don't do that. You keep people because they've been there a long time, because it would feel uncomfortable to let go, because you don't want to be perceived a certain way. So your internal warehouse fills up with acquaintances you don't truly connect with relationships you've built on habit instead of alignment, with conversations that don't move your life forward. That's dead stock. And the problem with dead stock isn't just that it exists, it's that it occupies space. Mental space, emotional space, cognitive space. And the more space it takes up, the less room you have for clarity. This is where people get stuck. They think they need more answers, more direction, more clarity about their life, but what they actually need is less noise. Some relationships don't feel heavy until you look closely. They feel light because they're familiar, but being familiar can mask obligation. You respond because you feel like you should, you engage because it's expected, you maintain that connection, not because it adds to your life, but because removing it would create friction. And over time, that becomes a tax. Not a loud one, a quiet one, a slow, consistent drain on your attention. And attention is your most valuable resource. You don't get more of it, you can only allocate it. So every place you give it is a decision, even if it doesn't feel like one. There's a concept in finance called zero-based budgeting. You don't start with what you had before, you start from zero, and you rebuild intentionally. You don't assume anything deserves to stay, everything has to justify its place. Now apply that to your social life. What if you didn't carry anything forward automatically? What if every relationship had to earn its place in your life based on who you are now? Not who you used to be, not who you were when the connection was formed, but who you are today. Most people never do this. They inherit their circle, they maintain it out of inertia, and they never stop to ask, does this still align? Because if you did, you might realize that a lot of what you're holding doesn't. And that's where the shift becomes uncomfortable, because letting go doesn't just remove others, it forces you to face yourself. When you remove the noise, something happens. At first, it's quiet, uncomfortably quiet, because you've been used to filling that space with conversations, with notifications, with other people's thoughts, opinions, and energy, and without it, there's nothing to buffer you from yourself. This is the part most people avoid, but silence doesn't immediately feel like peace. It feels like exposure. You start to notice your thoughts more, your patterns, your internal dialogue. Things you've been able to ignore become visible, and for a moment, it can feel like something is missing, but nothing is missing. What you're feeling is the absence of distraction. There's a difference between loneliness and clarity. Loneliness is what people fear. Clarity is what they avoid, because clarity requires you to sit with what's actually there without filtering it through someone else, without outsourcing your thoughts, without using connection as a way to escape your own internal state. And when you stay in that space long enough, something shifts. Your thoughts become more structured, your attention becomes more focused, your decisions become more aligned, not because you added something, but because you removed what was interfering. When you stop distributing your energy across dozens of low-impact connections, you get something back, bandwidth. And most people don't realize how powerful that is until they actually experience it. Because now your attention isn't fragmented, it's concentrated. You can think deeper, focus longer, build something meaningful without interruption. This is where solitude stops feeling like absence. It starts feeling like leverage, because now you are not reacting, you're creating. And the energy that used to go outward starts compounding inward. At some point, the question changes. It's no longer, who do I have? It becomes, what am I building within myself? Because when you remove external noise, your internal world becomes your primary environment. Your thoughts, your habits, your standards, your direction, that's your portfolio. And for the first time, you can actually manage it, refine it, strengthen it, invest in it without constant interference. This is what most people never reach, because they're too busy maintaining everything outside of themselves. There's a shift happening quietly. People are starting to value something different. Not visibility, not accessibility, but privacy. Not in the sense of hiding, in the sense of control. Control over their time, their attention, their energy. And the fewer people who have access to you, the more intentional that access becomes. This is where solitude becomes a form of status. Not because you have no one, but because you've chosen not to be available to everyone. Once you experience clarity, you start to protect it. You become more selective, not out of ego, but out of awareness. You realize that every new connection has a cost, and you start asking different questions. Does this add value to my life? Does this align with who I am now? Does this require more than it gives? And if the answer is no, you don't force it. You don't carry it, you don't store it, because you've already seen what happens when you do. This isn't about avoiding people, it's about removing misalignment. There's a big difference. Isolation without intention can feel empty, but isolation with awareness becomes structure. It becomes space. And in that space, you can actually see what matters. You can choose what to reintroduce, and more importantly, what not to. Most people are managing everyone else but themselves. They're maintaining relationships but neglecting their own internal system. They're available but not aligned. And at some point that catches up, because you can't build a clear life on a cluttered foundation. So maybe the question isn't, why do I have no friends? Maybe it's, what did removing them allow me to finally see? Because when your internal space is clear, you stop looking outward for direction. You stop needing constant input. You become self-sufficient in a way that most people never experience. And that, my friends, might be the quietest form of power there is.